What's up, world? This your boy Tommy Mav, and I just came in because I wanted to basically just kind of give as much info on this subject as I can because I feel like there is little to no objectivity when it comes to this subject or this discussion. Everybody, it seems like I know the media incentive, right? Um, the media want a story. They have to have something to talk about. So in order for that to happen, they have to find a team to talk about, right? The Lakers are dealing with the whole situation with Anthony Davis, and no other team really moves the meter, right? So you have the one that the majority of people want, which is the Lakers. So basically because LeBron is the protagonist of the NBA, so you have to have an antagonist. It's a rule of writing, right? The media knows how to create a protagonist. Well, really, most of the time, the people create the protagonist. That means that's the person who engineers and goes through the story. Like they create the story. So in order to do that, you have to have a protagonist, which they found out is LeBron James. It does not. LeBron James is that protagonist who is moving the story forward, and the people chose LeBron. People. He's the most popular player in the NBA. So once they choose him, now they have to try to figure out a way to kind of meet that expectation, um, and still have a captivating story to connect that story. So that's what the Nets are. The Nets are the antagonists, meaning they're the ones that the media builds up for everyone else to hate. So because the Nets are built up for everybody to hate, they're going to try to build them up into the best antagonists they can make them. They're going to try to make them seem like they're unstoppable. They're going to try to make them seem like they're the greatest team in the world. They're going to go all this narrative. Now, everybody with any common sense look at this sideways and be like, dude, they just started Brown at center again, and you're trying to make me believe that somehow in a 7-game series they're going to beat the Nets, the Celtics, or even to a lesser extent maybe the Raptors with a 6'4" guard playing center. You want me to believe that because Kyrie Irving and them can score a lot of points, that's somehow a plausible alternative. You're going to try to convince me that they are not holding and praying by a thread, that they can somehow find a way to get another big man, because we all know DeAndre Jordan isn't guarding a light post in the postseason. See, the thing that makes the Clippers look so good, especially right now defensively, is because they did something about 3 games ago in which they inserted Brown into their starting lineup. Right, they start out small, which is what James Harden started in the Rockets. So when James Harden started that on the Rockets, which to me was dumb when he did it there, the narrative was the same. When they traded Clint Capella, and everybody was talking about how great the Rockets were because they had went to small ball, because they were such a matchup problem. But they weren't really a matchup problem. It was just D'Antoni's system causes you to play fast. So when you're playing, as I said last time, when you're playing a team that is just played a game a day or 2 days before that, and now you're coming up, it's not like they have time to get in and put in new sets and to fix certain things and stuff like that before they play you. They have to play you on the fly. So, and most of the time it'll be a back-to-back, or it'll be a day where they get a rest and then the next day they play. So when you're watching the game, it's like, okay, defensively they're still a liability. They're still terrible. People are getting wide open shots whenever they feel like it. And even against the Lakers, against the Nets, against the Clippers, it was the same deal. Whenever the team chooses to truly start to just, lock down and force them to take bad shots and then get back on the other end, they get such easy shots that it's so easy for them to relinquish the lead. If they go cold for for a minute, they generally will give up 6 or 7 points in like a minute because they can't stop anybody defensively, and they rely on switching so often that 90% of the time you can get whatever matchup you want on the defensive side. Now, the problem has been that Brown, because of the short turnover in a lot of these games, people are not set up to stop Brown. Now, you can kind of see the Clippers kind of figured him out halfway through the game. Towards like the end of the third quarter, they kind of figured out a way to neutralize him. They started bodying him. Now they're forcing DeAndre Jordan out into these ISOs instead of trying to just bully him down low. They're just instead of trying to bully Brown, they're playing to the strengths of the Nets, and they brought DeAndre Jordan out into a lot of these ISO situations because they realize they just switch everything. So you can pretty much say, I want him, because they just keep switching on defense because they know none of them are going to fight through a pick. So they've established early in the season, Kyrie Irving is not fighting through a pick. James Harden is not fighting through a pick. Joe Harris is not fighting through a pick. So they said, okay, we're gonna just scrap this on the ball man up defense, and we're gonna just start switching. So every time someone throws a pick, we're just gonna switch, and that works until a team figures out, okay, well then let's stop trying to just bully them inside and just start bringing them outside, and then just getting ISO and playing them like we play a normal team who has a big. And they did that, and once they started doing that, the lead evaporated in seconds. And I have no doubt in my mind, if Paul George would have stayed in that game, Paul George was the leading scorer in that game. If Paul George would have stayed in that game, they would have lost that game. They had no answer for Paul George, and it was Tyronn Lue did them a favor by taking Paul George out. So now it's one less person and it was a good matchup for the Nets against the Clippers, because if you watch the Clippers, they don't have a lot of guys who can beat you ISO. They don't have, really. It's just Kawhi, Lou Will, and Paul George. And when Paul George and Kawhi are on the court at the same time, it limits Lou Will. So it really limits him into a 3-point shooter. But those two are really the ISO players. So when you take Paul George out of the situation, they try to still run the same thing with Lou Williams, but you can't, because Lou Williams isn't the matchup problem that Paul George is. Paul George is 6'8", 6'9". Lou Will be lucky if he's 6'1", 6'2". So it's not the same type of dynamic. So now you can throw a guy like Kyrie on him, and he can at least be serviceable in that position. But before, what they kept doing was they would ISO it. I mean, they would keep switching until they got the matchup they want, which was Kyrie on Paul George and DeAndre Jordan on Kawhi Leonard. And then it was just pick your poisons, because they knew once they got DeAndre Jordan out, they had no rim protection. So all they kept doing was penetrating and then throwing around him, because he can go vertical because he's tall still, but he doesn't have the same athletic ability. So they can still get around him. So they just kept bringing him out and then taking him on the ISO. And if he tried to cut, or he tried to just stand in the same spot, they just passed it around him. Zubac had an easy layup. And that was the way they evaporate the lead in 2 seconds once they figured it out. And that's the difference between when you're playing a team in a 7-game series, because after this game, the Clippers will come out the next game and they say, okay, we know how to beat them defensively. We found that out towards the end of the second game. That's why the team will be like, a series will be 4-1, and the team will win the first game and then they won't win another game, because it's fairly hard to keep a scheme, a solid scheme, when you don't have the personnel throughout a 7-game series, because it's too competitive. And they're playing, you're seeing the same sets, you're seeing the same defensive sets, you're seeing the same offensive sets. So you're going to get slowed down on the offensive side too. So it really is very important when I tell people, You can't just rely on the Nets. Can't just rely on outscoring every single team they play. Because if you think that that's going to be a remedy to win, trust me, there's a lot of D'Antoni teams that thought that they could do that. And I've yet to see a D'Antoni team that has succeeded in doing it. Every year they say that about D'Antoni's system. Oh, it doesn't matter. They can score. It doesn't matter. They can score. No, it does matter. And after a while, you're going to see exactly what happens to every D'Antoni team. Going back to Steve Nash, it happens all the time. That getting the ball up fast, all they do is they get the ball and they get out and run. If you stop them in the half court, they go into the pick and roll. This whole narrative that James Harden is reading defenses perfectly is just not true. He's not reading defenses perfect. That's the same system. That's equivalent to a system quarterback. He's a system point guard. That means he runs D'Antoni's system to perfection. But he's not. It's not like he's doing what KD was doing when he was running in that system, which was finding the matchup problems and then moving the pieces around till he got the matchup problem where he knew he would get the best, most efficient scoring opportunity. That's what Kevin Durant was doing when he was the point forward, which I think he should be the point forward. I think to be 100% honest, you saw that Brooklyn Nets team with just Harden, right? You saw that team with just Kevin Durant. The only one that really sucks when it's just them is Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie Irving is the worst decision maker he's the most talented, terrible decision maker I've ever seen. Because he really is just an ISO player. But the problem with him being an ISO player is that he relies on taking bad shots. Like people rave and they rant about how good he is at maneuvering, but they don't realize how many shots he misses because he relies so heavily on taking bad shots because he is like 6'3", 6'4". So yes, he's able to make a lot of those shots, but he makes a lot of those shots by taking them in bad angles, bad awkward angles, and he will go cold where he can't make a shot because all he relies on is taking bad shots a lot. And he's talented enough to pull them off some games, and to a point that it's almost, mesmerizing to watch. He's one of the funnest players to watch because he's such a skilled player. But the problem with relying on those type of shots is when you end up with a guy like Kawhi on you, you end up with a guy like Paul George on you, you end up having to take those shots and you make those bad shots even worse. And now you're taking all these bad shots, and now all these people are they're feasting on you defensively. He's the one that went cold in the fourth, right when they needed the points the most. He couldn't make a basket outside of that one layup he made early in the fourth quarter. He was just bricking everything. Because when you force a guy like that who is already kind of small and that's why I say the problem with having your primary or one of your primary scorers being a shorter guy is because you could, and he's more of a shooter than he is athletic guard. Like it's hard to put a 6'8", 6'9" guy in front of a guy like Russell Westbrook. You know what I'm saying? Because Russell Westbrook is so quick that person will end up in foul trouble really, really fast if you try to put him on a smaller guard like that. Someone like Kyrie Irving who relies more so on just taking good angles because he's such a skilled basketball player. If you cut him off, he's going to turn around. He's going to hit you with a turnaround. If he's so skilled that he does not have to rely on fouls like a James Harden does. So you don't get into a lot of foul trouble guarding Kyrie Irving. So you can put a bigger guy on him because he's not the type of guy that's gonna, take the contact and get the foul, because that's not his game. And he's one of the softest players you'll find, both on offense and defense. He doesn't put his body on the line on the offensive side much, and he doesn't put his body on the line on the defensive side much. Like he doesn't get a lot of foul calls. He's just a very skilled player, and he doesn't have to because he's such a talented player. But when you are the Brooklyn Nets and you're relying on that guy to do that, especially in a situation where he plays, and now you have Kevin Durant, who is a liability inside, DeAndre Jordan, who is a liability out everywhere pretty much, but mostly outside and on the perimeter. He's 100%. Like the Clippers showed you tonight. Bring him out here. Y'all gonna keep him in the game? Okay, cool. Y'all don't want us penetrating? Okay, we gonna bring him out here. Let's see how well he does. He didn't do well, so he's terrible on the perimeter. Harden is terrible everywhere but the interior. Kyrie Irving has all the talent to be a great defender, but none of he has none of the toughness to be a great defender. He's quick to back off and just let you play and let you do whatever you want because he's so confident. Oh, we'll get the points back on the other end. He was doing that tonight. Ole, okay, lay it up. Ole. I never thought I would ever feel sorry for James Harden on the defensive end. I felt sorry for James Harden tonight because he was the only one really well, I'm talking about out of the normal ones because Brown he's fighting for position, so he'll pretty much eat dirt as long as he can play. But when you look at a guy like James Harden and you feeling sorry for James Harden, something's up. When James Harden was possibly one of the better defenders on the floor tonight. So when you got that dynamic, you know what I'm saying, and he was still terrible, but he was better than those. And that flop at the end was just classic James Harden. And the funny thing about it, what I really laughed about is a couple weeks ago, they brought out LeBron James, and they were like, oh, LeBron James flopped on this play. And the Jordan fans had a field day with that one. But it's like he flopped. I wouldn't even put LeBron in the top 10 floppers in the NBA right now. Right? I don't even think LeBron is classically never at the top of the free throw shooting. He just doesn't get a lot of free throw shots. Mostly because he always tries to power through and get the and one. And I think that works to his detriment sometimes because he's always trying to power through. And sometimes you need to be able to, he's so big and strong that he's able to do that. But sometimes in his ability to do that, it masks the foul. So you going up and it doesn't look like a foul because you're so strong and they're so weak that it doesn't affect your trajectory. You just look like you're going straight. So he tries to get and ones, and I think it would benefit him more sometimes if he just took the contact and laid it up. But yeah, I mean that flop on that last play was ridiculous. I mean, James Harden was. I mean, first of all, it was laughable that in his mind, somewhere in his zoned out ass mind, he thought he was gonna go. He could be 1-on-1 with Kawhi Leonard. I remember I was laughing. When the play started, I laughed. I was like, "Are they serious with this shit?" Like he thinks he's gonna guard Kawhi Leonard 1-on-1. Kawhi Leonard looked like this is like almost like he wanted to stop the game because he kind of stuttered for a second. Like, they serious with this? And he immediately just went at him like, "This is a joke, right?" Like he's like, "This is food." He went at him. And from they talked about the last little form, but Harden's defense was terrible that whole drive. As soon as he put the ball on the ground, James Harden fouled him immediately. Like as soon as he went to dribble, James Harden didn't even try to get in front of him. He just tried to stick his arm out to stop him getting around because he's such, as I said a minute, he has the worst feet in the world. That's why I say it's just certain people. No matter how much effort they put in. That's why I always say about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving has all the talent to be a great defender. If Kemba Walker can be a good defender, he can be a good defender. He is such a liability on the defensive side because he just doesn't care. James Harden, on the other hand, you can see he takes it personally. He tries to be a better defender. But the problem with him with him is just physically he can't do it. He's just not a good defender. So when Kawhi Leonard went around, it's like you can't, like, this is food. He went around, immediately fouled him, James Harden, Kawhi is going to still trying to cut off the angle like you're taught to do. He's on the back. Now I'm going to get over, and now he can't do anything but either foul me or let me score. But that doesn't happen. What Harden did was he immediately grabbed him again, and then tried to stop his upward trajectory so he couldn't lay it up. It almost looked like James Harden tried to foul him so he couldn't score. But in the end, Kawhi Leonard kind of shoved him off of him, and he didn't. And it wasn't even like an extensive, like a forearm extension. It was just like a little shoulder bump. And James Harden threw his hands up, and they rewarded him for it because for some strange reason in the NBA, they care about James Harden's flopping. It's like I think at some point, because I tell people all the time, I think NBA is rigged. I think NBA is rigged, but not for people. I think it's rigged for betting. Like, when I tell somebody, I watch basketball more than probably as much as anybody. I watch all the teams all the time. And I could not tell you to the point how much one team is going to beat another team. It's just hard to do because you don't know how people are going to be shooting. You don't know how people are going to be playing defense. And shooting is such a fickle thing that it's so hard to do that. But it's funny to me that these people are doing it, and you'll see a team that you know is supposed to cover easy. Like, this is an easy cover. Like, this is plus, spreads +5, and it's like the Toronto Raptors versus like the Orlando Magic. And you're like, this is easy. I'll take the +5. I'll take the 5 points for the Raptors. All of a sudden, the Raptors it's the first quarter. The Raptors' 3 top defenders are already out because they got 3 fouls apiece. Like their best defender gets thrown out to where he got 3 fouls in the first quarter. Now it just happens to the person that affects what that team does the most happens to be the one that's in foul trouble. And then all of a sudden now this team has the advantage, and all of a sudden that +5 is evaporated. That happens too often in betting for me to ever believe that BS is true. First of all, most people gonna be like, why would you give that a +5? You would think that they would switch it, that would be easy, a 10-point spread. No, it's a 5 because they're trying to bait you into betting on it because they know the fix is in and it's rigged. They know those when you start seeing them doing that, it's people won't understand betting. You need to understand how betting works. They bet on how much points they score. They point the over under on how many points going to be scored. They bet the over under on who's going to win and how often how many points they're going to win by. And you can tell the NBA is rigged for betting. Even that guy Tim Donaghy said that they would rig games and bet on games. He said it was rampant. And they tried to bury him after that. But he said, no, this was rampant. It's like they all did that. It was more than just me. I wasn't the only one who did that. So there's irrefutable, I think, evidence that proves that the NBA is rigged for betting. And when you watch the games, you can clearly see when they're rigged, when it's about betting. And right now, the Nets, as far as like the competition that they're playing, and the spreads that they're giving the Nets, it's like they're trying to get people to bet against the Nets. I think they gave like the Lakers like +7 against the Nets. They were doing, even though they knew, and all of a sudden before the game, Dennis Schroeder's not playing, but that's like I said, you know that I'm not trying to get into the whole betting thing. I just want to point out, I think the NBA is rigged for betting. I don't think it's rigged for a team. But when you watch some of those calls, you're like, come on, dude. Like that clearly was people. Majority of people probably took the Clippers. The Nets are on a 5-game spread. 5-game road trip. Last game of the road trip, people probably assumed the Clippers. It probably went with the Clippers to win that game. And all of a sudden, you get this crazy ass call where you. Come on, dude. Not to mention they had been calling questionable calls that whole fourth quarter. Every time the Clippers got close, all of a sudden they would get a call that made no sense. Like what where did that come from? Like that's a terrible call. and they did it like 2 or 3 times. But at the end of the day, like I said, that's the way the NBA works, in my opinion. It's like everybody, every time you see betting, pay attention to betting, because I guarantee you, your favorite team gonna lose some games that they should win based on their officiating, because that's just how betting works. They try to get a bunch of people. They put up a attractive betting line that they know a lot of people gonna bet, and then they rig it the other way, so that because it's usually rigged. The plus and the minus in the betting is usually because the house has to give you a certain amount of points for you to bet for the other team. And generally, when you bet for the other team, you generally make more money betting for the underdog, because you bet less to win more, because not a lot of people are betting on that team. So what it shows you is that majority of people are betting for this team. And when that switches around, next thing you know, they can make a lot of money by making you bet way more for a team that is a favorite and then losing than they can getting someone to bet or underdog and then it going the other way. But but that's just the way the Nets, I think, are built. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the NBA is built. But the Nets in general, if you watch the way that the NBA, these writers would probably salivating. They probably would have been so pissed if the Nets lost that game. I'm 100% sure they would have been pissed if the Nets. They want, because now you got shit to talk about tomorrow, right? See, now every show, it's 11 o'clock on the East Coast, right? Right now, I've yet to see a show for the next morning, but I can guarantee you all of them are going to be talking about how great the Nets are. Even though they blew a lead, I mean a 13-point lead in like 2 minutes. You know what I'm saying? They got out of it with off the hair of their nose because Paul George inexplicably sat. And once again, I think it's NBA betting. Inexplicably sat with 2 minutes left. I mean, like I said before, they know that if Kawhi Leonard doesn't get called for that charge and the Clippers lose, what are they talking about tomorrow? How good the Clippers are? No, they're not. They can't talk about the Nets being bad because the Nets only lost 1 game. So they ain't really got nothing to talk about. So now you got a whole day of people saying the Nets, what does the loss to the Clippers mean? Is it nothing or is nothing? And that's a 5-minute segment. Because the majority of people are like, man, it really doesn't tell you anything. So now you just stuck with this weird thing. But now the Nets beat the Lakers, they beat the Clippers, and they beat the Suns. So now the Nets are the best thing in the world. Oh gosh, I didn't even look at Twitter, but I guarantee you go to Twitter right now, every single talking head is probably putting in all caps letters how good the Nets are. And if you do look at that, that's common sense. They do that because they need something to talk about. But the problem with doing that is the Nets are not really a good team. And so what makes me so annoyed about these people is not that they say these hot takes and all these things that are stupid. They say things for the flair of it. So I understand it. But what makes me mad is that they'll build their house on this sand. And then when it crumbles, when they are wrong inevitably because of what anybody with common sense can see, how the hell are they going to beat the 76ers and the Lakers with AD with that lineup? They're not. Oh, they're going to put KD in. So KD can't guard a big man. Well, so you still don't have anybody who can guard a big man, or a guy like an Anthony Davis or Joel Embiid who can shoot the three, take you off the dribble, and still beat you in the post. They don't have anybody who can do that. So until you show me somebody that can do that, it's almost like you insulted my intelligence by telling me the Nets are an actual threat to anybody. Well, they can score a lot of points. Well, we've seen they give up a lot of points. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a talk so in a 7-game series, they're going to be flipping the coin that they're going to outscore everybody when they've shown in the regular season that that's a terrible idea. And this whole narrative, once again, that they're good when they play teams above 500, which makes me so angry 90% of the time I see it. Once again, they didn't play with all three tonight. They never play good teams with all three of them. I think they played like 3 games when they had all 3 of them in, and in all 3 of those games they gave up historic numbers of points. Because you know what happens, you cannot sit KD, you cannot sit Harden, and you cannot sit Kyrie Irving. If you're gonna have 3 ISO players, you need a player to stretch the floor, and that's Harris. And if you're gonna have KD at the 4, you're gonna need an actual guy who can actually protect and body in the paint and get rebounds. That's DeAndre Jordan. You can't play with Brown if you're going to be playing with Kevin Durant, because that would force Kevin Durant to be the rim protector and the big man, and he ain't out rebounding anybody in the post. So you can't play Brown with Kevin Durant. You can only play Brown if you have someone like maybe a Jeff Green. Jeff Green to an extent, but that's only if you're playing a smaller team. If you're playing a team that has a natural big like the Clippers, that's not going to work. You're going to have to play KD with DeAndre Jordan. That's the only way it works. So now you put 4 liabilities with KD. So that's why teams tend to score way more points when all 3 of them play together than when they play by themselves, when it's just those 2. See, when you have 2 guards, because the majority of guards are not good defenders, right? Most of them are the smallest players on the team, and most of them are not the most, that's why they play on the perimeter a lot, because they can't really body anybody else. So it's okay. It's easier to hide 2 guards, especially when one of those guards is 6'6", 6'7", and James Harden, who's pretty stout. You can push him inside, and he can still be a valuable threat in the post to get rebounds and box people out. The problem with Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant most of the time is not going to be in the post. So you can send Harden down in the post, but you don't have that Brown or Green to make up for the perimeter defense that you're losing. So now you have to rely on Harden and Joe Harris to guard the perimeter, and that shit ain't happening. They're not guarding the perimeter. So now you're screwed. So that's why I tell people all the time, I don't rate them, because we all know that they can be good if it was just 2 of them. If it was just, if you could add in just one more defensive player, the perimeter player who can slow them down to play along with a Harden or a Kevin Durant, then you're fine. You can do that. But you cannot do that with Kevin Durant in the game with those 2, because they're both liabilities. James Harden is a liability and I ain't gonna go over it again. I went over it before, but they all have liability. They all have flaws that are easy to pick out and easy to play off. So if you're the Nets and you're better with those 2 gone, and now the media is building you up into this juggernaut that everybody with any semblance of common sense knows is not. They're not no juggernaut. These people don't know what the hell. Like they're gonna go on tomorrow. You're gonna click on the TV. They're gonna be talking about how great the Nets is and how nobody is gonna beat the Nets. When 2 weeks ago they were saying the Nets are not a threat. They don't see nothing has changed, right? They beat the Lakers team that didn't have AD, right? You can say they beat the Clippers team, but if, as I said, if you put Paul George in at the end of that game, I have no doubt they lose that game. So, but they know either one of these games could have went the other way. They were getting blown out by the Suns with Harden by himself, and then they took their feet off the gas and they snuck back into the game, right? Because D'Antoni's system is predicated on scoring fast. And the Suns let that game get away from them. But it wasn't a great outing. It wasn't a great showing. But they don't care. And Kyrie didn't even play in that game. But when it's all when you actually look at what the media does, they don't care about truth. They care about how neatly a story can be put together. With the Nets being this great team, they know people are going to be against it, but people are also going to click on it just so they can comment. They're going to click on it just so they can argue with people and say the Nets are not good. But they know that. They're just doing it because they're trolling. They know the Nets are not going to win no championship. Now, last year with the Clippers, that was a different story. I think a lot of them legitimately thought the Clippers were a good team. But I don't think anybody with any common sense can sit up there and really believe that the Nets are going to blow anybody, are going to beat anybody with that defense they got. Where people can just, I mean, even LeBron, it's like when they were playing the Lakers, LeBron was by himself. It's like LeBron take a seat, their leader jump back up to 20. LeBron step on the floor, instantly 12 points taken off. Then LeBron go sit and they'll jump it back up to 20. It's like they have too many liabilities on the defensive side to be a threat in a 7-game series. It's like people can get what they want when they want it. And when you can sit up there and make people believe that they're a great defensive team all you want, people know that these, you know what they really remind me of? When you're a kid, I don't know if anybody grew up in the hood, but when you grow up in the hood, it's like people have reputations, right? It's like one hood I have a good player, another hood I have a good player, and another hood I have a good player. So everybody's like, that, do you know so-and-so from, this hood? It's like so-and-so, he's supposed to be a good basketball player, football player, whatever. And then you start to hear about them more than they actually show. So you've never actually seen them, but people have been telling you how good they are for so long. And then when you show up and you actually see the person they're talking about, and they're like 5'3", and like 110, like they're short. Then you see them dribbling, they're slow, and he's like, man, the hell are they talking about? This the dude? It's like, yeah. And then you realize he does like one thing that's really good, like he has a crazy good shot, or he's a really good dribbler. And then all of a sudden you say, oh, I can kind of see why they gave him the reputation, but he's grossly overrated. Like, yeah, he's a good dribble, and then you'll be talking to people like, didn't I tell you he's good? It's like, and you kind of can't say he's not good. Like, you still beat him by like 8 points, but in your mind you're thinking like, it's not that I think he's not good. It's just he's not what you said he was, and that's what's going to happen in the playoffs. They're gonna be like, it's not that they're not good. They're good, but they're not good. It's like when you watch them play against the 76ers or a team, and I'm not talking about in the season, because this is what really gets me annoyed. When you have someone come out after every regular season win, and they'll be like, see, I told you. It's like, dude, that's not a 7-game series. A 7-game series is not like playing someone who's going to be playing someone else in 2 days. They're not caring about loot. They want to win every game, but they realize they can't practice and do the same thing. When you're playing in a 7-game series, you are playing. A lot of times you have 2 days off, and then 2 days, probably 1 day to rest, another day of rest, film work, and stuff like that. And you have probably another day of run-throughs and practice. Then you have the game. That's generally happening, and that's usually on the conservative. Sometimes you have 3 or 4 days in between where you watch and film and getting to know these team sets and stuff like that. So you either constantly have to be changing your sets, you constantly have to be adapting to what the other team's doing to defend you, and adapting to what the other team's doing to score on you. And that's a harder task. And a lot of people are going to be sitting up there saying, well, they look good. Well, that's the point. They're paper champions. They're mirages. They look good when they look good, and then when the media, you throw in the media just championing them like they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I said this 2 weeks before they even beat the Lakers and the Clippers. I said, man, every time the Clippers win a game, they're the greatest team in the world, because the NBA needs an antagonist. They need a story. See, because people don't remember that ESPN and the NBA are they work together. You want to understand why all of a sudden they talk about the basketball way more than they talk about football. When I grew up, they like ESPN. They talked about basketball, but basketball was like the little brother of football. But then the NBA signed that deal with them. ESPN, that big deal that made them basically have to fire half of their people. Now they're basically the stepchild. They're basically the mouthpiece of the NBA. So they're constantly trying to work up storylines, work up angles, things to talk about that are connected to the NBA because they realize they talk about the NBA, the viewership goes up, there, which is usually on their channels, and they're getting the best and biggest games, and people are watching it, and so their revenue going up, and it also actually helps their company, which helps the people talking. So they need someone to go against LeBron. It's not like they can sit around every day and say, man, the Lakers are gonna win. It's nobody else is even close. Because if they say that, they'll start to realize that when there's no fascinating narrative to go along with the play, all of a sudden the ratings start to drop. So they're like, okay, we got to create an antagonist. Last year was the Clippers. The year before that was the Warriors. LeBron is the superstar protagonist. He's the hero of the story. So that's why I always trip when people blame LeBron for the narratives in the media. The media use LeBron as much as they use the teams he's playing against. That's what they do. They bring up these arguments. They do all these things to catch heat. It's like watching wrestling. It's like they build up a villain, and they build him up, and they make him untouchable, right? They build him up into a juggernaut, and then you have the baby face that's sitting there, who they're always basically standing for. Like they're making sure every time there's a crack missing or something's wrong, they fill it in. And then when they see when the heel is red hot, then they make him face the baby face. It's a perfect situation, right? And that's what they did last year with the Clippers, and the Clippers ended up losing, and then the ratings kind of went down after they lost because the storyline's not there. This year it's the Nets and the Clippers, so you got two heels, but they started to realize the Clippers lost heat. They flamed out in the playoffs. So now it's like, which one of the heels are we gonna put them with? And then they started to realize that that people were gravitating to this Nets narrative. But then the Nets showed themselves to start sucking, so they had to jump off that bandwagon. And so now the Nets are starting to gain a little more traction. So now they're throwing that back out there. Oh, there, see, the Nets are unstoppable. They can't be beat. And people they leech and they grab onto it because that's theater. That's the way you get someone to get into the movie. You build the antagonist up. You got to build the Nets up into something so that the Lakers can have a heel to go against this over baby face, which is the Lakers and LeBron James. So now we got to get someone to, be on par. That they're on the East, they're on the West, so if they play each other, they're gonna play each other in the finals. But the problem with basketball that's different than wrestling is you can't fake the outcome. It is what it is, and you can build them up all year. But the 76ers are the best team in the East, and it's not even close. The 76ers took all those players that were on the Lakers and contributed a lot for the Lakers last year defensively, and they put them on the 76ers with a stacked team that was already a stacked, and they were already a stacked team to begin with. So you got people who have championship pedigree mixed in with a coach who is one of the best coaches in the league. They have the best big man in the league. They have one of the most confounding and dominant defensive team. I mean, look at that team. You got a 7-foot point guard, because everybody talks about the offensive side because that's this new age of basketball fan. They don't give a shit if you could guard a park car as long as you if you can guard a park guard with a Uzi. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? As long as you can look pretty when you shoot a three, right? You do your cute step back. It doesn't matter. You can't guard anybody. It don't matter. He's the best. Like, how is he the best? He can't guard anybody. All he does is shoot, and he doesn't even play any defense. So it's to me, when I watch basketball, it annoys me to watch those players because to me it's too often. I hate to see that. Like you see this guy like a Brown was tonight, who's diving around, bumping, taking charges, and trying to get rebounds and all this other stuff. And you go down there, you look pretty, and then you go take a break on defense. That to me kind of seems like it's, you know what I'm saying, it's cap. It seems weird to me. But if you look at that scenario, it's like, come on, man, you got a 7-foot point guard in Ben Simmons. You got the 2-guard who they 2-guard? Danny Green, who's 6'6", 6'7". You got Tobias Harris, who's 6'8", 6'9". I mean, really, you think? And then you got the best, statistically the best 3-point shooter ever is Seth Curry to spread the floor. Now he may be a little bit of a liability, but he's not the liability his brother is. And then you got Joel Embiid, who is the best all around big man. That means defensively, offensively, spread, take you off the dribble. And you think I'm picking the Nets because they got a guy in Kyrie Irving who could do a good turnaround shot, and James Harden who dribbles for 30 minutes to pass a 5-feet pass that he could have passed without running down 15 seconds of time. I do not have faith in an offense that relies on scoring quick. I never will like D'Antoni's system because I think it's stupid. I think it's a gimmick suit system that makes them look a lot better, makes him look a lot better than he actually is. Let's do this fast. Let's score quick. Let's get down before the defense can set up, and then we run in the pick and roll with 2 people, and they got to either come to you or give you a clear lane or let the big man roll to the basket. It's like, yeah, that's gimmicky and it's nice, and you're going to outscore a lot of people, but it hurts you defensively because most of the time, because you run back, by the time you score, the other teams are already back because you have to run to get ahead of them. So once and then if you score that quick, you have to run to get back. So that's why his defenses always suck because he gives up defense to play offense. Now you got him going against Joel Embiid, who is the antithesis of them. The one thing that they struggle with is the 76ers strength. Who's going to stop Ben Simmons from getting to the grip? That's all he can do. You're going to put Kyrie Irving on him? You're going to put James Harden on him? They're going to be in foul trouble. So who you going to put on Joel Embiid? DeAndre Jordan? Brown? It's like, and they say, they might get Drummond. Okay. Yeah, Drummond. Let's go look at a couple tapes of what Joe, what's his name? Joe, how did I forget his name that quick? Y'all know him, Joe. Wow, I'm really sleepy. I can't even remember his name. Joel Embiid. Go ask him how that worked out in the games they played Cleveland. Because I saw those games. He's having like 38. So go get Drummond and think that's going to fix your problem because it's not. So they're going to get JaVale McGee. Wasn't he on that same Cleveland team? It's like, first of all, if they can find a big man at this point in the season, then he ain't worth getting. Because right now people need versatile 5. You're not gonna find a versatile 5 that can guard the post and the perimeter. Somebody like a Tristan Thompson ain't out there for you to find. Best thing you can get is maybe 2 guys who can do it. But you already got one who can kind of protect the rim and DeAndre Jordan. Maybe you can get another one who's more of a slender or small 5. But I don't know any of those guys out there. I don't know any quick, big 5s, athletic 5s that won't be taken away from what you got on the offensive side. Like I said, DeAndre Jordan can still roll to the rim, as bad and unathletic as he is. Andre Drummond can't roll to no rim. He can't. He's gonna mess up their whole offense. How can James Harden how can he be a valuable threat on the offensive side when if he's jamming up the lane, causing it so Kyrie and James Harden can't penetrate to kick out for the threes? So it seems like he just throws a monkey wrench into everything they do if they brought in Drummond. And you can bring in a guy like JaVale McGee, and I think that would be a good fit. But JaVale McGee is notoriously can't play long minutes. He's notorious for that. He has breathing problems, so he can't play long. So that's the best thing that you got on the table. You're not beating Joel Embiid with JaVale McGee. There's a reason why he's on this like 4 for 15 in the last 3 or 4 seasons. So, but anyways, I just wanted to come in there and drop in and say that, because at the end of the day, I feel like too often the media starts to do that. And I just want to get ahead of the story and just let people know. Do not let the media trick y'all into believing that this is somehow going to bring fruit. Because people keep comparing it to the Clippers, and there's commonalities, but it's not the same thing. The Clippers are actually a legitimately good team last year. Nobody denied that. People just didn't think they were good as the Lakers. But everybody knew they were a good team. Nobody was doubting that the Clippers were good offensive and decent defensive team. The argument, because like I said, they try to make it like most fans are stupid. But what I find most of the time is that when you actually engage with fans, you realize that majority of fans are more knowledgeable than the people on television. Right? Because they were saying it from the get-go, man, you going to rely on Paul George in the playoffs? They were right. And right now they said the same thing. Who's going to play defense for the Nets? Everybody was saying it. Who's going to play defense? Now, they may not be able to interpret and explain it the way that I do, but they still can commonly see that this doesn't make sense. If Kyrie is terrible defensively, Harden is terrible defensively, and Kevin Durant is slight, they're giving up all their pieces that could actually help them win a championship for a guy who makes them a liability and gives them holes and flaws they didn't have. I don't think there was very few people who actually thought this was going to work. And all these people who are stepping up now who said, oh, it will work. Keep that same energy. Because if you think they're talented, then you should give LeBron James credit when he beats them. Because I know he's going to beat them. So when he does beat them, I hope you're ready to give him credit and say how great he is. Which I know 90% of y'all ain't going to do. You're going to make up another excuse. Now all of a sudden that sucked. They were never that good to begin with, and this, that, and the third. But if you believe that they're great, and you believe there's no way LeBron James can beat them, then they should be considered a good team when he beats them. But all right, y'all, I just wanted to stop in and give y'all my thoughts on that. Please, if you have not liked it, please like it, comment, and subscribe. Y'all have a nice night. Peace.